5%. So it's a huge proportion of their workforce.
And you have some other astounding figures. At least half to 75% of people at NSA headquarters, the NSA, National Security Agency, many times larger than the CIA, are contractors, 50 to 75% contractors working in the private sector.
Right. The NSA was one of the agencies that basically refused to talk on any level to me about this. But that's what I've been able to gather from talking to people who actually work for, people employed by companies that are contracted to the NSA. But what your listeners need to understand is that a lot of these contractors actually work in these buildings. So the National Security Agency is just up the road from here in Fort Meade, Maryland. They have a huge black building where they all work. And so many of the people actually working inside that building are contractors working for Booz Allen Hamiliton or Lockheed Martin or General Dynamics Information Systems, all the companies we've talked about. They're actually sitting there doing this classified work. And the NSA has been a real sort of pioneer in the use of outsourced intelligence. They went into it really heavily in the late 1990s and started expanding their contractor base from a few hundred companies now where it's literally in the thousands. And so that means that we know the NSA tracks and listens to our conversations, listens to literally millions and millions of conversations, cell phones, email communications overseas as well. And so that analysis, a lot of that analysis is being carried out by private sector companies with people with high-level security clearances.
Before we end, Tim, I wanted to go to a piece you've just broken in Salon.com called Blacklisted by the Bush Government. Explain.
Well, this is a story about how NSA surveillance can have a domestic impact. I write about an Islamic charity that was based in Saudi Arabia that was under investigation, that has been under investigation by the U.S. government for ties to terrorism. They had a fairly large chapter that they invested in Oregon, in Ashland, Oregon. This was in the late 1990s where they became affiliated. And so my story is about the effects of this investigation on this Oregon chapter, which, based on the reporting I did, there's no evidence of connections to terrorism, yet by declaring them specially designated global terrorists, they were able to shut the organization down and basically drive it out of business with no evidentiary hearing, no ability by these people to challenge the evidence, which is all classified. All the important evidence is classified. I find it a severe distortion of our justice system and very alarming.
Can you talk about the players involved? Talk about the Saudi sports star.
Oh, Salman al-Bouti is one of the key figures in this story, and the charity was called the Haramain Islamic Foundation, and the man I went to Saudi Arabia to interview him. He was a advisor to them, and he helped set up Al Haramain in Oregon. He's now an environmental figure. He's a government official in the city of Riyadh, where basically his job is inspecting all restaurants, for health problems. And so he's called a specially designated global terrorist as well, and he's called that by the UN because the U.S. designated him as such. He also has not been able to see any classified evidence. The U.S. says he's a terrorist, but I think, last year the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh invited him to a function, and which they rescinded after it was reported in the Portland Oregonian. But a lot of people like that that I met in Saudi Arabia, they're called. They've been accused of being terrorist supporters in some way by the United States, but they operate there freely, and they seem to have a lot of love for the United States. When I met this man Solomon, he loves to watch the Lakers. He has TV all the time to Chris Matthews of MSNBC, and it was kind of humorous to think of him as a terrorist. But I think the problem is there the organization itself and some of the countries it operated in, according to U.S. intelligence, did provide money and supplies to some jihad groups overseas. But the issue is the actual evidence that can never be seen, and so we have to trust. We're supposed to trust the U.S. government's judgment on this.
And you begin your piece with this conversation that he in Saudi Arabia is having with his lawyers in the United States, and he's trying to figure out how to pay them. And well, then you tell the story of what happens and who's listening.
Right. Well, the significance of the Al Haramain case is that this man, Solomon Al-Bouti, that I interviewed, was on the phone with two of his lawyers here in the United States in March 2004 at a period when the NSA surveillance program was being questioned by the Justice Department. His conversation was monitored by the National Security Agency without a warrant. The only reason Al Haramain lawyers found out about it was they were given a document by accident by the Treasury Department, which does these investigations of global terrorists and puts the financial screws on them. They accidentally gave them an NSA document, highly classified document that showed they were under surveillance. On the basis of that document, they have sued the National Security Agency for warrantless, for violating FISA, violating the 1978 law that regulates foreign intelligence by the NSA, and that lawsuit is the only lawsuit still in play in which the NSA warrantless program of the Bush administration might be found illegal by a federal judge in a federal court.
Tim Shorrock, I want to thank you very much for being with us, investigative journalist, author of the new book, Spies for Hire, The Secret World of Intelligence Outsourcing. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. At the end of the broadcast, we'll play an excerpt of Malcolm X, By Any Means Necessary. He would have been 83 years old today. But first, we'll talk about Guantanamo. Stay with us.